Hi, my name's Dave Clark. I'm a journalist and I've been invited to attend an event in the ocean city of Plymouth, which is being held by Simple, which is a partnership between organisations like Pop Plus, Collab and the Torbay Development Community Trust. The event is all about losing control in the context of funding and social finance, where all the attendees, a mix of funders, commissioners, providers and investors, will be asked to think differently about how we work together as humans, how we can learn from one another, and how we all need to understand more about complex systems as opposed to simple models. So let's kick off this first podcast by having a listen to some of the expectations that some of the delegates have, the challenges that they face, why they're attending the event, and some of the views that they may wish to get across.
I'm Sam Magney and I'm a Knowledge and Learning Manager at the National Lottery Community Fund. So the National Lottery Community Fund is a distributor of the money that is provided through those who play the National Lottery game for good causes. We were talking in particular about how social investment and the type of work that happens in the social investment space is bringing to the surface a lot of issues that a lot of people are grappling with in terms of how do we corral money, relationships, interests in a way that work better to support people in communities, especially when their needs are complex, and especially when actually you need to bring those money, relationships and interests and other resources together in a way that will help to create a complete system of support around people. Our particular focus and our particular strategic focus is how we support people to take the lead in shaping the way that services and communities respond to them and to what matters to them. And in particular, in terms of my work in the fund and our work around social investment, some of the things that we're really interested to explore is how can we make money work hard and really well for people. And also in the social investment world, we're really interested in not only making money work hard for good, but we're also interested in the nature of the good that it does, so the social impact that it delivers. And I'm really interested to explore with people at this event some of those questions around, actually, are we looking for ways in which we can prove directly attributable impact, or are we actually talking about the ways in which we can look for the contribution that collectively we make to influencing the way that a system operates around people, and when it comes to understanding how to organise social investment, we've got a question about, well, how do we play different types of money, including repayable finance, into that system, right, to change what happens and the manner in which happens, and how do we also structure social investment to incentivise certain outcomes or perhaps behaviours. Right. The money has to be subordinate, and I guess that is my main message, that we have to work out how to put money to work in a way that in each case is going to be the most useful way of making happen what people need to have happen, yep, and in the manner in which it needs to happen. And we also need to think really carefully about the behaviours that money incentivises, either by design or by default, and we need to be really conscious about that. It's so important that we have events like this where we can begin to think about how can we devise ways in which we make sure that together we are learning and all the time applying that learning to what we're doing, so that at any point in time we're trying to optimise what we do to have the best kind of outcomes that we could possibly deliver for people.
Money, relationships and interests. That sounds like a tricky combination, but interesting to hear how Sam brings those three aspects together to talk about this system of support, and we'll come back and hear from Sam later on. But before we do that, Let's hear from Gareth about his expectations.
So I'm Gareth Hart. I've got two roles. One is as a director of my own business, which is called Iridescent Ideas Community Interest Company, and I'm also the chair of Plymouth Social Enterprise Network. As Iridescent Ideas, we provide business advice to help people start up and grow social enterprises. So we do a lot of work around things like choosing the right legal structure, finding investment and finance, and then proving the social impact that social enterprises create. So what PSEN provides on this programme is quite a lot of specific expertise around social investment. And a couple of years ago, we had a social enterprise investment fund linked with the council here, and that invested in 40 social enterprises in the city. So it's a really good example of how social investment can work. As my own business and as PSEN, I mean, we've got a real interest in how we can get, I suppose, more cash into social enterprises. We think that they need more money to grow and develop, and there seems to be a bit of a block. And we've got to understand why that's there, and we need more cash to do more good things. Charities, particularly with their trustee model, I think have an inbuilt risk aversion in the concept of a charity, which I think prevents trustees borrowing money because they're worried about, because they don't own the business in a typical way. They're more custodians of that business. So I think there's a risk they worry if when they finish their trusteeship, they're passing on liabilities. Whereas if it's your own business, it's much easier just to take that risk. Sure. So that's one reason. I think just basic awareness sometimes, I think, is one issue. People don't know what's on offer. I think fundamentally also is that some of the social investment deals aren't fit for purpose. So some of the interest rates are 8, 9, 10%. You can get better from your bank. There's a fallacy at the heart of it for me, which is if you give money for a social return and a financial return, if you're still asking for a higher financial return, then you're sort of defeating the point of the social return. There's something contradictory in that concept for me. My principle would be, maybe call me idealistic, is if you're investing for a social return, you should be less concerned about the whole cold hard financial return. Yes, you've got to wash your feet, but why are these deals still really expensive? I just think it's just a mess. It needs to change. I mean, there's lots of money out there, and the other thing is, I think it's often very large deals. There's not a lot of small scale, easy to access capital. I'm up for some really interesting radical thoughts. I love some controversy, a bit of debate and argument. The heresies thing is quite interesting. I think we can talk about some stuff there. This is a bit challenging. I think we need to really fundamentally rethink business and rethink charity for the next 10, 20 years. We've got a lot of challenges. I'm really excited about how that can develop responses to those challenges using social investment.
Gosh, this is shaping up to be something. We've got Sam talking about money, relationships and interests. We've got Gareth talking about fear, risks and liabilities. So interesting to see how this is all going to pan out in the discussions later on. And Gareth also mentioned the idea of the heresies, and this is going to be a feature of the second podcast. We're going to be listening to the little heresies that have been set. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's have a listen to Will.
Okay, so Will, Associate Director for Business Development at the South West Academic Health Science Network. What we do as an organisation, we're funded by the NHS, by government, and we're here to try and bring evidenced innovations that have been proven to work, whether or not they're new treatments or new technologies or new ways of working, and we're there as an organisation to help them bring them to patients much more quickly, because it can take a horrendous, and this is a conservative number, 17 years to bring a good piece of research into practice. So we want to reduce that gap. So this event, it's twofold really. So firstly, we are, as an organisation, we've been supporting social investment for a number of years, and we support a social investment fund with the fantastic Cornwall-based Residents, which is a social investor based in our region, and it's called the Health and Wellbeing Investment Fund, and it supports social enterprises, companies that are in the health and wellbeing space that need funding and to grow and develop their businesses. But also we want to see more innovation from the fantastic voluntary social enterprise sector into the NHS. And the only way to do that is by helping them grow to a scale where they can deliver new services to patients and communities. One of the things that I think we face as an organisation when it comes to introducing innovative practice into the NHS is evidence, and having the right evidence to encourage clinicians and commissioners and even patients to take those innovations on. The second thing I think is having organisations that can operate at scale to deliver real transformative impact. And then the third, I think there is amazing amounts of innovation out there, but actually in terms of the voluntary social enterprise sector, we really need to work with them because they could provide some of the biggest innovations in our sector, which is all about preventing people becoming ill in the first place. And we know that sector provides incredible value, but they need support to grow and scale what they do. So I really do think we have a lot we could be doing with that sector, but we've got to support them to become financed and sustainable and able to really deliver. Innovation is only ever achieved through collaboration, through chance meetings in networking events like this, encouraging cross-sectoral collaboration from all sorts of sectors, from commissioners, from the NHS, from social care, from patient groups, from the voluntary sector, from businesses, from investors. We need to facilitate links between all of those really important actors if we're to really innovate and address some of those big, wicked challenges that our NHS faces, but also our planet face. I want to see things happen, so I hope that there'll be some real tangible, practical things that come out of tomorrow. Events are really important, but we want to try and avoid the old talking shop syndrome. So if we can hopefully forge some new alliances, maybe create some practical next steps, I'll be really excited by that.
So that's Will from the South West Academic Health and Science Network talking about supporting social enterprise and looking for more innovation. But interestingly, Will mentioned evidence, which implies measurement and KPIs, the key performance indicators. And this is a theme that we'll be coming back to, specifically actually in podcast 3 with Claire Fitzgerald, who will be talking about how key performance indicators can be managed so that they don't influence the behaviour of stakeholders. You can go to that podcast now. It's podcast number 3 called Group Discussions. But I'd recommend that you stick around actually and listen to both Matt and Imogen from Pop Plus as they talk about their expectations of the day's events ahead.
My name is Imogen Potter and I work for Pop Plus. My job role is Capacity Building Manager, and our vision is around trying to help to create a fairer and better place, Plymouth. How we do that is sort of a role around brokering, facilitating, convening, building capability. This event, it is a simple event, so it's one of our events that we committed to as part of the project work plan. But it's also wider than that, in the sense that when Matt came on board as the CEO, he came with a whole vision around the fact that systems need to change. Funders are funding in silos, commissioners are commissioning in silos, and yet actually the social problems aren't changing, and actually the culture and the system needs to change in order to actually have an impact on the ground. Okay. So this event, the thinking around this event was an opportunity for investors, funders and commissioners to come together with potential providers, which is the whole basis of the Simple project, but also taking it a step further and being a bit braver around, well, how can we actually do things differently? How can we actually align finance? How can we get rid of some of those barriers, those challenges, in order to make a difference? Because otherwise, again, in 10 years' time, nothing's going to change on the ground for the Jane and the Joe blogs on the street. There are still issues with regards to demand for social investment and the need for funders and commissioners and social investors to come together and work collaboratively with potential providers, because as I've said, if things continue in silos, nothing's going to change. The challenge is being able to break down those cultures, those processes, those mindsets in order to enable that to happen. I think there is fear in terms of doing things differently. Both in terms of fear with regards to ability to do things differently, and fear around who do we speak to, how do we do it. It's that risk averse culture. Things need to change, and there are models out there. There are people in Plymouth
that actually want to sort of, come on board with this movement and work together in order to try and make that change happen.
So changing mindsets and changing culture. What I'm picking up from these conversations is this isn't going to be easy. But I guess, recognising the questions, asking the questions, that's a pretty big step forward. You can't get the answers and you can't make progress unless you recognise what you're up against. So let's hear finally from Matt.
So I'm Matt Bell, CEO of Pop Plus. We focus very much on the relationships between those charities and social enterprises by bringing them together through networks across the city.
What's the reason for being at this event?
So we're a host, so it's part of the Simple project that we're delivering in partnership with the other two organisations, Torbay Community Development Trust and Exeter CoLab. And the reason behind it is to start exploring the wider environment that finance and funding exists in the hope that we change the environment to suit the requirements of delivering impact better. So people ask me, so what's innovative about this? And I think the innovation is not doing anything or not thinking about anything new, but to actually do what we already know. Okay. So we already know what helps people become motivated or more motivated either in their lives or in work, but we don't actually do it. So the main challenge around this is picking out some of the kind of pearls of wisdom that we all know about, all see, and actually apply them. And it's the discipline of applying them in every setting, whether it's how you design your organisation, but in this context, it's how we design our financial systems to fund the things in the right way and in the right form. We've designed the day to be split up into 3 different stages, gradually getting more and more specific by the end of the day. I mean, my hope would be that we get to the point where we've got 1 or 2 quite nice, tangible ideas that we can start to take forward as a collective in the room, locally, regionally, and potentially nationally.
Any kind of reservations about how it might go?
No. So I believe that we've established the day and designed the day in a way that will allow people to feel heard, to have their contribution. And I think if you do that well, then you've got a bunch of people, over 100 in our case today, that will be in a productive space that results in the kind of magic that only collective can bring.
What a fantastic day it's shaping up to be. So many people with so many ideas. So how do we sort of boil all that down? Well, it seems to me, as Matt said, we know a great deal and we now need to apply what we know. But this is a little bit tricky because as the other contributors have said, it involves people, it involves interests, money, agendas and complex systems and perhaps even some die-hard habits. And all this activity and new thinking provokes emotions. There's fear of risk, there's fear of failing, and there's that old fear of being measured. And these are some of the areas that are up for discussion. In podcast 2, we'll be looking at the little heresies. And in podcast 3, the discussions will be exploring those further. And we'll also have an opportunity to lose control. That'll be in podcast 4. So my thanks go to Sam, Gareth, Will, Imogen and Matt. Please do dip into the other podcasts. There are many other contributors with some very interesting insight and opinion. This is a How production. Please share and subscribe.